any pressure on them. And Rick has more teaching obligations this sem.
And everything is online now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that makes things very convenient.
No energy.
Okay. Oh no, now I can see. Aido, can you hold on for 1 minute? I'll be right back. Thanks.
Shucks.
Okay.
I remember that I needed also coffee.
I'll start admitting people.
Yeah.
All right. We may begin, Dr. Pawlik, when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Aido. All right. A very warm welcome to our archaeology webinar series here at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and the Anthropological and Sociological initiatives of the Ateneo. So we have now a new round of exciting talks for this semester that present cutting-edge research and new discoveries in archaeology and paleoecology. We are very pleased to have as today's speaker Dr. Noel Amano from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena, Germany, where he is the head of its zoo archaeology laboratory. And so Noel's research is on the zoo archaeology of South and Southeast Asia, where he focuses on themes of human-animal interactions, human subsistence economy, paleo-environmental reconstruction, and taphonomy. Noel received a BA in cell and molecular biology and a Master of Science in Archaeology from the University of the Philippines. In 2017, he completed his PhD in quaternary prehistory at the National Museum of Natural History in France, in Paris, and the Catalan Institute of Human Paleoecology and Social Evolution in Tarragona, Spain. His dissertation explored late Pleistocene to mid-Holocene paleo-environment and human subsistence strategies in Eastern Java, Indonesia. And in addition to working on Southeast Asian hunter-gatherer sites, he has been involved in research projects looking at early agricultural communities in Southeast Asia, specifically the introduction and spread of domestic animals in Vietnam and the Philippines. In the last 2 years, he has co-directed excavations of cave and open-air sites in Sri Lanka with the aim of looking at early human colonization of the region. He has also co-directed fieldwork in the Philippines and the Southern Caucasus, and has ongoing research in Vietnam and Indonesia. And last but not least, we have been working, Riczar, Noel, and myself, together on a project that investigates early osseous technology and the functions of bone points from sites in Sulawesi. This webinar is jointly facilitated by Dr. Riczar Fuentes from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and myself. And the host and manager of this webinar is again Mr. Aido Balboa, also from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And he will also lead through the Q&A section later. On behalf of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and ASIA, the Anthropological and Sociological initiatives of the Ateneo, I'd like to thank the people and institutions that made this webinar series possible. The members of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, the School of Social Sciences, Areté, the Creativity and Innovation Hub of the Ateneo de Manila University, and the Eduardo J. Aboitis Sandbox Zone. Okay, I will now hand over to Dr. Noel Amano and his talk on Out of Africa and into South Asia, investigations into the prehistory of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Amano.
So thank you very much for joining. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, I hope everyone can see my PowerPoint, and thank you again for the invite to deliver a talk here in this webinar series. So I will be presenting on behalf of my colleagues from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History, the research that we've been doing in Sri Lanka the past 3-4 years, the findings that we've had, and also some unpublished findings that we have from the past excavation. So the idea here is to look at the early colonization of South Asia, specifically the southernmost point of the region, which is the island of Sri Lanka. As with any other presentation that involve human evolution and human migration, we will start with a map. So we know that perhaps you know that humans moved out of Africa from approximately around 200,000 years ago and then colonized the rest of the world. Humans, like modern Homo sapiens, unlike other hominins before our species, managed weirdly enough to colonize almost all the kinds of environment that we can think of, ranging from high altitude environments, the Arctic, deserts, and rainforest. So these kinds of environments, at least for now, based on current evidence, are impenetrable to the earlier hominins that were present in Africa, migrating out, like Homo erectus and Neanderthals. These make us suspect that there's something that allowed humans to migrate and colonize and utilize resources from this environment. As an endeavor in the Max Planck Institute for Science of Human History, you are really interested in rainforest, specifically looking at rainforests previously posted as green deserts or barrier to human migrations. Previously, these rainforests, dense rainforests, were seen as barriers because of the difficulties in procurement of foodstuff. If you've been to a rainforest, you might have seen how difficult it is to survive there. There's this in the 70s, there's this wave of thoughts thinking that rainforests are difficult to penetrate because of the difficulty in procuring food there, specifically carbohydrate and carbohydrate-rich plants and fat and protein-rich fauna. But this is in contrast to the archaeological evidences that can be found in rainforests from Borneo to Java, Indonesia, and maybe next session you would hear from Dr. Adam Broom in Sulawesi, and even in the highlands of New Guinea. You can see evidence of human occupation from as early as 45,000 years ago. So these allowed us to investigate this question. How did late Pleistocene Homo sapiens, modern humans, adapt to tropical rainforest environments? And this brought us to our research in Sri Lanka, specifically looking at two cave sites, the sites of Kitulgala and Fahien. These sites are known previously from detailed excavations of our Sri Lankan colleagues in the region. They were excavating these sites stratigraphically since the 80s. What our research brought to this table is that we have now more advanced ways of dating from OSL and other advanced radiocarbon dating methods, specifically a method that allows us to date tropical sites more accurately. So first, I will present the site of Fahien. So you can see here, it's located in Sri Lanka's wet zone. So Sri Lanka can be divided in terms of plant biogeography and the environmental types into two broad zones: the wet zone, where you have a typical rainforest, and then you have the dry zone, characterized by woody shrubs and open environments. Reexcavation of Fahien Lena, led by our colleague and previous student in the Max Planck and our close collaborator, Ocean Wedage, in 2012. So he excavated the site again after excavations in the 80s and the 90s, revealed 4 distinct phases of site occupation. Careful analysis of the sedimentary type allowed us to determine at least 4 phases of site occupation. What is very special here is that previous excavation stopped at around this layer. Dr. Wedage continued excavating and found intact layers before this underneath this rockfall. And these intact layers were dated to around 45 to 50,000 years ago. So far, the earliest evidence of human presence in Sri Lanka. So we are very happy with these results. Again, phase D, using advanced radiocarbon calibration methods, we managed to date it between around 33,000 to 48,000 years ago. And then you have continual occupation until 5,000 years ago. As you would have noticed, there's this kind of gap in dating between phase D and phase C. And we attribute this to erosional stages in erosion of cave sediments. So we are sure that the rockfall that covered most of phase D, the older sediment, protected the sediment layer from erosion from the cave. As you can see here, there's even erosional cuts in the upper layers. You can also see an erosional cut here. So careful excavation allowed us to do this. Not only careful recording, but also detailed study of soil micromorphology, of faunal taphonomy, as you would see later. So it was my pleasure to undertake the study of the faunal remains from Fahien. It's a little bit of a daunting task because they managed to collect, Fahien is a very rich cave, and in terms of faunal remains, more than hundreds of thousands of bone fragments were recovered. So the idea now is to have a more strategic way, feasible way, economic way of studying these faunal remains. So this is where I stepped in for my postdoc research in the institute, and I studied with Dr. Wedage specific excavation squares and excavation features, as well as deposit types that will allow us to study paleoecology, subsistence strategies of these people. As you would see in the graphs here, several different kinds of animals were present, ranging from rhinoceros to elephants to wild pigs, wild deer, and other small animals. It is very specific in Fahian that you can see in terms of distribution the predominance of small mammals, specifically mammals that live high in the canopy, like monkeys, squirrels, and civet cats. And this allowed us, this detailed look at the faunal remains from the site allowed us to look at three very distinct aspects of human presence in the region: subsistence strategies, or what kinds of economy they were using to survive in the rainforest; technological adaptations, which is what kind of tools they were using to hunt the animals and collect the plants that they were utilizing, as well as insights on early human symbolic behaviors, like culture. In terms of subsistence strategies, as I mentioned before, there was a predominance of hard to capture agile prey. So animals that are quite small, like monkeys, that are quite difficult to capture. And not only because they are fast, but also because they live high up in the canopy. So this includes two species, at least two groups of monkeys, Cercopithecine and Colobine monkeys, and squirrels, as well as civet cats. Cut marks, for example, in this bone from an otter, a river otter, and here from a squirrel. You can see these layers are from these bones are from the 48,000-year-old layers, showing that actually as early as 48,000, these small animals were being targeted for food utilization. When you look at the monkeys, the age structure, so you can look at the teeth of the monkeys to have an estimate of the age or time or age of death of the monkey. So you can have an idea of the population structure of what age the monkeys were being killed or targeted. And we saw that there seems to be targeting of adult monkeys. And we sort of, following this argument normally used in zooarchaeology, attributed this to deliberate hunting instead of passive trapping. So if you have a group of people trapping monkeys, you would have more or less all groups represented. Whereas if you're deliberately hunting specific adult or specific age groups, you would have a preponderance of that age group in your assemblage, which is what we saw in this site. We have more adults than young, neonates, or extremely old adults. So that led us to sort of generalize or conclude that most likely the animals were being hunted, deliberately targeted, I mean. And what facilitated this? In addition to the preponderance of animal remains, we also saw a lot of bone tools in the site from as early as 48,000 years ago. And these represent the earliest actually evidence of projectile technology outside of Africa. We have bone points and awls and needles made from monkey bones. So these, in addition to these points that we presume or we studied that were used for hunting, we also showed evidence of plant working based on other tools in the assemblage. For example, here is a canine of a monkey from, so it's the tooth of a monkey from 48,000 years ago, and the use-wear analysis of the edge of the monkey tooth tool allowed us to demonstrate that they were used for plant processing. And this is in addition, of course, to the presence of plant remains, macrobotanical remains in the site as well. In addition to these bone tools, we also recovered microlites. And in fact, again, these represent the earliest microlith assemblage in the region. So these are small tools made of quartz that we my colleagues who are studying this, Dr. Michael Petraglia and Dr. Ocean Wedage, as well as Andrea Piccin, sort of studied it and managed to show that they were most likely hafted flakes. So they were placed with a stick and used also as projectile points. And finally, in the earliest levels of the site occupation, we also managed to show instances and evidence of culture, specifically the use of shell beads. So you have here the shell Nosarius and Conus that you can also see in the Philippines, and you have evidence that they have been worn as beads. So you can see careful studies that these Nosarius beads were strung with a kind of thread or string. And we also found colorants, so ochre colorants and ochre beads. So you have this red ochre that has been used as early as the dawn of humanity as a sort of like, for lack of a better word, makeup, like a kind of a powder that is used to highlight highlight and how do you call it, from aesthetic function. So we also find these kind of minerals in the site. Now let us go to the site that I actually participated in an excavation in 2017 or 2018, the site of Kitulgala, also in the wet zone region of Sri Lanka. So it's not that far from Phahien. So what we did is, you can see here, all trench excavations from the 70s and 90s. What we did is we studied again the stratigraphy, and then we just dug 50 centimeter, a half meter extension of one of the trenches. And this, of course, is also very rich in deposits. We sort of observed what we observed from the previous site. So we saw that the date is also as early as of Phahien. So this cemented the idea that humans were present in Sri Lanka as early as 45,000 years ago. In fact, the most solid as evidence of human presence in South Asia, yes, around 45,000 years ago, with its corresponding assemblage of tools and fauna and plant materials. So, based on our research, we managed to show that the mixture of complex subsistence strategies, mainly relying on hard-to-capture agile prey from the rainforest and technological adaptation to these green deserts, as well as symbolic behaviors, showed that our species, perhaps this is what allowed our species to colonize environments like rainforests that were previously impenetrable to other hominin species as early as the late Pleistocene. So there are, of course, a lot of studies that is yet to be done, and we are continuing our research in Sri Lanka, specifically looking at the huge variety of tropical rainforest formations and how people were adapting to these different kinds of rainforests. And our research, not only in Indonesia, with Alfred and Rick in Sulawesi, as well as my previous research with my French colleagues in the island of Java, and as well as research by Phil Piper, if you've seen his talk before, in the islands of Borneo and Sumatra, as well as now what we are presenting in Sri Lanka, sort of contribute to this ever-growing knowledge of human niche construction, obviously, the manipulation of environments by human to suit their needs. And I always want to show this thing that a colleague of mine here from the Max Planck Institute sort of proposed that allowed humans, this idea that humans are occupying a kind of new niche, a new ecological niche, which they call the generalist specialists. So we are specialists for being generalists, all right? It's really this thing that allowed us to colonize the rest of the world, like all continents of the world. If you're curious and to learn more about these parts of my presentation and the research, I can forward you some of the publications that we made, that specifically these 2 articles that we published in quite high impact journals about the site of Phahien. We published as well a very detailed excavation report, a study report from QSR on the site of Kitulgala. I hope you're not yet overwhelmed, and I will present preliminary results of our ongoing study on other sites in Sri Lanka. So, but in this time, I would request, because I would be presenting, although I would not discuss in detail the results that we have so far, I will also request that, because these are unpublished results, that you please don't tweet or make screen captures of this presentation, this part of the presentation at least. So we know from previous surveys and excavations in Sri Lanka that you still have a lot of sites, like lots and lots of sites that have stone tools in the surface or shell midden in the site that could date to the late Pleistocene. And our idea is to go back to these sites and revisit them. But most of these sites, at least 99% of these sites, are open-air sites. So that makes everything more complicated to look at. So starting in 2019, just before the pandemic, we started doing our excavation in one site specifically. So we are guided by the work of the great work of Professor Deranigala. So there's this guy, a professor in Sri Lanka that did his PhD and did a mammoth task of documenting all of these sites. In his PhD dissertation, which has around 2,000 pages, he studied everything, including the stone tools found in the surface of all of these sites. And he managed to show that actually the presence of sites correspond to this presence of this kind of sediment, the RBFM, the red latosol in Sri Lanka. So wherever you find this red sediment, I will show you later, there seems to be this correspondence, a correlation to the presence of sites. And specifically, we look at sites 46 to 50, 54 to 57, because these are clusters of sites in the southernmost region of the island, because there's this idea that Sri Lanka was used as a coastal superhighway. So it's an ongoing debate on how come modern humans reach as far as Australia as early as 60,000 years ago, if they were using some sort of watercraft or if they were coasting, or like marching across the coast. And because Sri Lanka is tectonically stable, which means this coast in the south more or less represent the coast 70, 60,000 years ago, it's a very good place to investigate these sites. That's why we went to this places to revisit, specifically here. So you can see here the bathygraphic reconstruction. You can see that more or less these sites are also facing the coast as early as possible 60 to 40,000 years ago, when people were migrating out of Africa into Eurasia, specifically into Southeast Asia. So we went back to one of the sites called Bundala. So it's like site 50 here. We managed to locate all other sites and we saw the site. And these are the red latosol that I'm talking about. We investigated and excavated the site in detail using 3D. We recorded everything. When we are excavating this site, following the Max Planck protocol, we are recording everything every 5 centimeter, and also every finds have their 3D coordinates. And also it's a digital kind of recording where we record everything using tablets and barcodes and whatnot. So we also have a good opportunity with working with colleagues from CINE, the Center of Paleontology and Paleoecological Research in Burgos, and we are working with them specifically on radiometric dating, because we are not sure that we will find carbon, and possibly that the date of deposits will be much older than 50,000 years ago, which is way beyond the radiocarbon age range. We have experts doing OSL dating for us. It's very complicated to explain what OSL is, but it's a kind of dating where you measure the last time specific minerals were exposed to sunlight. So when a mineral is buried, it records sort of the last time that it saw sunlight. So you can have an estimate, therefore, of the burial period, like what age, around what age before X thousand of years before these minerals were buried. So this allowed us to date the site. So I co-directed this excavation with colleagues from the Department of Archaeology and the University of Sri Jayawardenepura in Sri Lanka. And you can see here our OSL dates. So there's a Meaden deposit. Here, human accumulated shell Meaden, and we reached the stereo layer of the site. This is around 6 meters of excavation on a 3 by 4 meter pit. So it's a lot of hard work for like 2 months of excavation in the site. We managed to find dates, which I will not discuss, but we found stone tools all throughout the layer. So you can see here the shells that they were, and these are being studied by colleagues from the University of Sydney, Patrick Faulkner and his students. And because we have records of the 3D coordinates of more than 70% of the artifacts we found, we can also reconstruct the spatial distribution of these tools in the site, which is here. So we managed to show where stone tools are concentrated and which part of the site stone tools were. And you can see here, for example, concentration in the lower layers as well as in some of the layers. And this allowed us to show actual layers of occupation or of presence rather than synthetic arbitrary delineations of the profiles. Because if you look at the excavation square, it looks like just one layer, and it really is just one geological layer or one sedimentary layer, and it's very difficult to detect actual occupational layers because we're working in a very dune sand deposit. And by the way, it looks very straight, the wall and everything, because this seems to be like sand, but it actually is very, very concreted sediment. So it's quite difficult to excavate the site. We would have to use lots of screwdrivers and trowels and metal materials. It's really a very tough, hard deposit. As mentioned, there's a presence of Stonetools all throughout the layer. So we are very lucky about that. And we are now studying in details, courtesy of our colleague from the University of Queensland, Chris Clarkson. He's the one studying the Stonetools, he and his students, and they are very much interested in the transition from the use of large Stonetools, large cutting tools, to the microlites. So it's our goal now to look at exactly when, if we can date it, the microlites started appearing in the site. So this fills in with the record that we have in the cave. So you have microlites appearing in the earliest period of cave occupation. And here you have microlites only appearing around middle of the occupation of the site. So we are now interested in building a bigger picture of human occupation of this part of the world. So we still have a lot of work to do. And in addition to this stone tool bearing site, you still have also sites which are in red here with recorded megafauna. So you have hippopotamus-like animals that have been extinct or were extinct as early as the Middle Pleistocene. So this is where my interest in paleoenvironmental reconstruction and a little bit of paleontology fits in. And I want to investigate more these animals because, as you know, Sri Lanka is an island like the Philippines, like some islands in the Philippines. Specifically, it's mirroring Palawan. It's more or less connected to the mainland, like Palawan, or mainland India in this case, in periods of low sea levels. But in periods of high sea levels, like right now, you have the island as an island. You have Sri Lanka as an island, and this instance allows some communities, animal communities, to speciate and to be isolated from the mainland group. And this is one of my interests in terms of my research project. So that's about it. I'm presenting this on behalf of the many people that are doing the research, not only in Sri Lanka, but also in the Max Planck Institute, and also our collaborators in Sri Lanka and in multiple universities, including our colleagues from the Center for Investigation of Human Evolution in Spain, in Burgos, University of Sydney, the University of Queensland, and the Griffith University. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noel. That was great and wonderful overview of such a quite complex and transdisciplinary research project that you are doing in Sri Lanka. I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. Ido, may I ask you about that?
Yes. We have one question from Vernie Sagun. She asks, hold on, were you able to collect soil or sediment samples for pollen analysis? I was wondering about the associated pollen assemblages with the archaeological excavation. If there are, were these pollen samples indicate the associated agricultural plants of the early settlers?
So we have, of course, we collected all sediment sample, not only for pollen, but also for leaf biomarker. So pollen tends not to be very well preserved in open air environment, and you have issues of leaching. So you have issues of pollen grains going down to the soil level. So you have misrepresentation of pollen distribution. So that's a common problem when you're excavating open air sites. And you also have sometimes biases in pollen distribution. So you have some other plant species distributing their pollen farther, some are nearer. So you have all of this complicated stuff. That is to say, we all collected so many samples for pollen analysis, for pytholites. So pytholites are the silicates that you find in plants as well. We also have one method that we are using right now, which is plant leaf wax biomarker, where you have you can identify what kinds of plants you have, at least if it's a grass or a forest type plant, based on the keratin that they have on the leaf sheet. So you can isolate this from the soil and then study the shifts in this composition throughout the set. But I would just have to point there to emphasize that we are studying Pleistocene sediment. So Neolithization of Sri Lanka, like in the Philippines, did not commence until around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. So there are no agriculture for that matter in the time period that we are looking at.
All right. I think that most definitely answers Sir Bernie's question. And in our live stream, unfortunately, we do not have questions. But fortunately, I think that will give us more time for the dialogue between Dr. Pawlik, Dr. Fuentes, and Dr. Amano. So, Dr. Pawlik.
Thank you very much, Aito. But of course, everyone is most welcome to post questions for Dr. Amano. Yes, meanwhile, we can start with continue with our conversation. I'm wondering, I mean, obviously you took a lot of samples, you had a lot of materials and finds. Where are they now?
It depends, like all the fauna have been returned to Sri Lanka. All the Stonetools were studied on the site, so we didn't bring them back to Germany, or because we are working in a multidisciplinary team, and most of our experts, our collaborators, are going to Sri Lanka instead of Germany. So most of the things that are artifacts mostly are in Sri Lanka, in the university. And the ones we have in Germany are mostly for paleoenvironmental studies. So mostly sediment samples from shell to reconstruct oxygen isotopes and all of these things. Yeah. So yeah. Most of them are also, it's very expensive to transport them, and German customs, if you are very familiar with it, is not that straightforward and easy. So
I think I remember, yes. Definitely. So but how is it now with COVID being around and blocking or hampering everything since now more than 1.5 years? How do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, so we were supposed to excavate in 2020 and we didn't because of the COVID thing, and also in 2021, but it never happened. So it's on pause, the project. But the good thing is, because a backbone of our study would be chronology, and this gives our colleagues in SINEE more time to study the thing. Actually, we have received the dates, but I'm not yet going to announce it. But also, in addition to that, we did this method called PPSL. I'm not very good in this very physics kind of thing, but the idea is, if you have OSL dates based on your tubes, and then you sample FIRB 5 cm sediment, you can measure the luminescence of the feldspar quartz and feldspar in this per 5 cm, and then you can then plot a curve, and you will have a more or less estimated date per 5 cm layer. So that's what we are trying to do here, to have because we're studying not only this site, because this geology seems to be present in all the other Pleistocene sites in Sri Lanka. So we wanted first to establish this robust chronology, so that when we go to the other site and we see a different geological or stratigraphical deposit, we will be able to say at least there's correlation in terms of geology site and chronology of the site.
Oh, Rick, we should try that. Hopefully, one day we will be able to return to our sites as well.
Yeah. Or find a new site.
Hmm?
Or find a new site.
Or find a new site. Yeah, definitely. That's actually the most exciting thing, finding new sites. This reminds me of my age, unfortunately, but you know, I was once participating in a project of Teraniagala with a long time ago with the German Archaeological Institute, and its commission for, what was it, allgemeine, so general and comparative archaeology. It's now renamed. It's called Commission for Outer European, I think, for the Outer European archaeology, something like that. And there were several sites, rock shelters in Sigiriya, so and particularly on the Kitulgala rock that quite famous, a touristic place with a gigantic reclining Buddha statue, etc. And I did the microware analysis of the Stonetools for them. It was one of my really first early microware analysis I did. Was just after my MA. It was quite an interesting material, but very difficult because mostly it was rock crystal. So it's completely transparent. You have a very hard time to apply the common method of especially high power analysis, where you use the reflected light microscope to look at the surface alterations, microscopic alterations of the structure of Stonetools. And if you have a transparent rock crystal, of course, the light just passes through. And you see a lot of traces, but you don't really know, is that use related? Is that natural, or what is it? That was one of the most difficult analysis I remember, but it was at the same time quite exciting. And it's a wonderful place, of course, to be. And I really envy you for this research project and the opportunity to be in that amazing space. I remember they had one problem with dating in that site, which you might not have, of course. But many rock shelters in Sri Lanka, and not only in Sri Lanka, but generally in the Buddhist culture, let's say, there are also there are Buddhist shrines. Many have Buddha statues, and I think one of the ceremonies to inaugurate the site is to ritually cleanse it with fires, and that I would say, could affect radiocarbon dating. Did you experience those problems?
Yes. The thing is, we are working with the teams from the university, so they already know, and they sort of like, okay, if there would be a ritual, it has to be outside the cave, and it has to be thing. But in Fahian, for example, even I was not there in the excavation. It was from 2012. But what they discovered, really fortunately, is that there was this layer that is around 2 meters or 1.8 meter below surface, and it was under a rock fall. So when they lifted the rock fall, you find all this preserved charcoal layer, and that's where we get the 45,000 year thing. So it's a mixture of luck, because as also, you know, like as you said, like not only is there a lot of like in the Philippines erosion inside the cave because of typhoons. In Sri Lanka, the monsoon rains are really destroying the cave deposits. So you have sometimes cave sites that have lots and lots of Stonetools outside. So you see that they were eroded at some point. Also, in the historic period, Buddhists, as you said, were starting to build temples inside the cave. So they were digging the deposits to have foundations. So it makes what is already complicated, as we know from cave deposits, more complicated. So that's the idea now, is we have always a way to look in the very close to the cave wall, as we are doing in the Philippines, which is more or less always intact in terms of stratigraphy. So that's what we were doing with Kitulgala. The only thing is that's why we didn't in Kitulgala we did the excavation. It was one of my first excavations I joined when I moved to Germany. We didn't find that much fauna in the layers older than 30,000. And it's confusing because we have in the report as well as in the collection layers that are correctly described as we found, but they were yielding too much fauna, like lots and lots of fauna. So it's still a question that we are trying to answer. But micromorphologists that are working with us from Sterling, they are very good. They also don't see microbone particles. So I think we are at least confident that it's a sort of a spatial use difference of the cave. Possibly this part where we were excavating was not that much in use around 30,000 years ago. You have some lots of stone tools, but not animal remains. So it's still a puzzle for us. But other than that, we have, I think, moved on from our cave excavations because we have 3 major cave sites here in Sri Lanka that are actually quite well studied by now. So now we are focusing our effort on the more open air sites, which is more, as we know, tricky to excavate, requires more setting up and more effort, and you're under a blazing 45-degree sun when you're excavating. So
that's the disadvantage of open sites. Also, I wish we would find open sites from this period in the Philippines. We are still depending on caves and rock shelters.
Well, maybe the Guadalupe one.
Yeah.
How do you call it? One of our luck as well is that we are excavating dune deposits, which is perfect for OSL dating, as you know. So that's why when our colleague from SINEA, from the Spanish Institute, saw it, they were like, okay, we will date as much as possible, because they are also very interested in the methodological aspect of it. Because you have here, in case of the people listening, you have here, like, imagine like what you would see in a beach or in Ilocos, in Vigan, where you have this vast sand covering, like a desert, and then you have the sand actually bleaching all the crystals, and then new sediments covering the older sediments. So you would have a progression of bleaching and covering of materials that are very amenable to this kind of dating. So they are very excited about that, from the methodological aspect of their research as well.
Yeah, that sounds like an ideal situation. I wonder. It was puzzling. You mentioned that chronological gap between 33 and 1,000 and 13,000. But then I remember, of course, our site in Mindoro, where we have a similar gap, and we have no dates between 28 and 12,000 years ago, and this seems to be appearing in several sites in Southeast Asia, like Cherry Malay in East Timor. They have the same problem.
For Songterus, where I did my PhD.
Songterus, yeah.
There's no, there's like 30 like LGM deposits, and then from 20 there's nothing, and then there's you have 11 and 12. So it's really rather odd phenomenon.
Mm. I mean, Bubok in Mindoro, that it's on a small island, and you could argue, well, the cave is at around 45 or 40 meter elevation, and okay, during the last glacial maximum, the sea levels were so much lower, and since the island is entirely made of limestone and fossil coral, probably prehistoric hunter-gatherers and fishers, they would have access to so many caves that are closer to the shore. And why would they go more than 100 meter uphill just to see that, to go to that site? But if it's more inland, if that doesn't matter, then I really wonder what could be the reason. And we know that people were present, because we have sites in the neighborhood, like on the mainland of Mindoro, that produced radiocarbon dates within that gap. So they probably changed their preference for occupation sites. Or
one mystery though for me is that it's like a at least in the sites that I looked at, it's a 12,000 year gap without any deposit. So that's why I'm working more in the idea that it's rather taphonomic, that it's rather so erosional phases because you always see this as well in like Sri Lanka, where what gave us this idea is when there was a big typhoon, or how do you call it, cyclone, whatever, in Fahian. Before we started working, it was like really unfortunate that my first excavation in Sri Lanka was 2 weeks before they had the biggest storm they experienced. So thousands of people died. But also, what thing is like they lost this site, Fahian, that they were excavating in 2012 because all the sediment of one cave was just swept away. So you have this thing. So that gave us the idea, okay, if this is happening every now and then, if you have a very, very big storm or flooding or landslide, mostly mudslide and landslide, it will wash away all the deposit of caves. Yeah. And that's why we're thinking it might be the case here.
Yeah. Could that be related to really the changes of climate, of environment, of weather during the onset or then of the LGM and during the LGM?
Yeah, possibly. I think Ile has and Stonetools has mirroring thing, and also two of on their side, they have deposit. That's the weird thing, because in many Southeast Asian island sites, I know that it's the case for Ile and also in Jarimalai, that they have deposits, but they have no cultural materials. So this might be in parallel with the one in Bubog, where people most likely were going somewhere else. Because you really still have like owl pellets and birds and bats, like natural accumulations. And in Stonetools, there's this odd, rather very dark layer of ash of some sort that is around the LGM. So it's kind of like maybe a case per case thing.
Yeah, yeah. But what's annoying in Bubok in Hilin Island is that we have that gap within a layer, within the shell mitten layer, the lowest shell mitten layer, as you know from our deposits, and we don't see it. So you don't really see that gap, that hiatus. It seems that in the layer we have 30 dates that are around 30,000, 28 to 33. And then at the upper part, in the upper part of the same layer, it's just 10,000, 11,000, and so it's well, shell mitten. Okay, if there are no people, they will not. Of course, the shell mitten will not grow, and that makes sense. But there's also no sediment. There's no sedimentation, and that's a bit odd. So normally you would expect a sterile deposit, a sterile layer in between, and we don't have that.
Also here in the site we just excavated, there's a shell midden layer that is present for kilometers around. So for a long time, the debate is whether this is anthropogenic or not. My colleagues are still working on it. They believe it could be anthropogenic based only on one. Well, there are many lines of reasoning, but mostly it's one species. It's like rather odd for you to have a very selective midden when you have several species around and you have like kilometers and kilometers of just one clam present. So yeah, so they are studying this in detail. They are looking at size change through time, like what you were doing in Bubog, like with the shell, with Lambis. Here we have I'm sure you're familiar with it, the ever confusing Polymysoda Geloina, like these freshwater bivalves that are a problem in the Philippines to classify.
So it's a bit like in Cagayan, the Cagayan Valley, so Lalo and so on.
That's a little bit of a, and it's interesting because they are very, very close to the coast, right? And then these shell are from estuary and freshwater. So it's another interesting aspect that we are looking at, whether even though if they have access to the coastal, maybe we don't know, maybe there was no beach, maybe there was. We still have to do the more landscape environmental reconstruction thing. So we're still in the early phase of our research here.
Did they use shell for tool making?
We suspect so. There are fragments of clams at least in the cave sites. We are not sure yet in terms of like, because there's not that much of them. We think that most of the shell materials were used for ornamentation. Although one piece of a shell from an unsecured and dated layer that could be from around 20,000 have plant fibers inside. So this one is one of those things that were in the collection, one bag that were like from this layer that we don't know from, but by context association. Because if you've seen the profile I've shown you, maybe it looked familiar. They are also digging here with the context system. So sometimes it's if you have 500 contacts, it's a little bit of a nightmare to reconstruct past excavation.
Yes, I can relate.
So, but it's also helped us a bit in at least my postdoc project in terms of fauna materials, because they are very well, as you know, with Dr. Professor Derenigada, he's very experienced in excavation, and his staff in the department are incredible in excavating historical sites. So they are very good in the context system, and they are very consistent in applying it. So
it makes sense. Yeah, definitely.
They have very reliable recording methods, and when you ask them, they still remember, okay, that layer, and they have a notebook or something that they can show you. So yeah, that allowed us to reconstruct things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the right way, and especially if you deal with structures with a certain complexity in different features over time, and it's in the outdoors, it's an open site. This is probably the best way to do it. But yeah, you are really forced to maintain a very thorough recording method. It can easily get confusing.
But when we were excavating the OpenAir sites, I because I'm co-directing it, I told them no way that we are going to use the context system in a 2-month excavation where we want to excavate a 6-meter trench. So that's why. But also because we know that beforehand, we are specific in excavating by geological layer. We also know the geology a little bit, but also we are doing a 3D plotting of everything. So that allowed us to do the spatial analysis that I showed to detect actual layers that are actually impossible to detect by excavation.
Yeah, applying modern methods of geodetic survey and instruments like total stations, and really going after practically every find and feature that you have is really the way to do it, and you can reconstruct actual occupation phases and identify them within geological layers and natural deposits so well. Rick and I were recently discussing whether we should for our project look into RTK instruments. Do you have any experience with that, or do you apply that?
Sorry, the RTK?
So GPS-based surveying. So using, instead of a total station, using a GPS, a rover and a base station.
Yes, we did that for Mongolia, and I think we have a project paper coming out soon, and it improve because it's the Altai, so it's like incredibly big, and I'm a participant. I mean, it was a colleague of mine who's doing. He's an expert of surveying, and we managed to minimize error to 5 centimeters in a 28-kilometer square map. So
this sounds like science fiction.
Exactly, and I cannot even believe it. But then when I saw the effort that they were bringing into building this ground GPS thing, that is super annoying for me, because that's because I'm not an expert of this. But it's the first hour of the day, 2 hours is just for setting this up. So and then you do the survey with a handheld GPS, going around, finding plotting everything, and then checking it with like 4 map models and aerial GPS as well, and all of these things. So they managed to do, I think, 10. So 5 is the most accurate, but okay, sometimes it's 25 to 30 cm error. But in a yeah, 2 kilometers, sorry, not 20, 2.8 kilometers square. We managed to show that it's a 5 cm error.
That's I don't know what to say. It's really impressive.
I don't understand how they were doing it. I was there to hold the peg and hold the thing that they asked me to hold, or to log in the things that I'm recording. I'm not sure how they were doing it. So to be honest, but yeah, I'm more handy when it comes to the total station. So that's the only thing that I sort of know how to do what we did in Sri Lanka, which is the basic stuff.
So it helps if you really have a couple of specialists who know how to set it up, who know how to operate it. So it's not just using the GPS of your smartphone and go around.
And I remember they were telling me as well, I don't know how accurate it is, but they also managed to do a lot of aerial drone shots calibrated with this ground GPS thing. Which was actually the goal of this project. It's like the artifact plotting thing. We were actually just doing it so that we can do something, but most of the time they were flying drones actually to map, you know, like these Altai deer stones, rock art kind of thing that sort of been known before but not properly recorded in terms of the GPS details. So I think they were doing that more. When it comes to Sri Lanka, we were actually, all of these maps that I showed you, I had to digitize them and find them like Google Earth ground truthing, which was a lot of time and effort. Like, oh, they have this feature in the map that they made and it's very close to this town, so most likely it's this one. So that's how we are doing. And then of course it's not accurate that much, but we managed to find like lots of them back. So it's effective.
So you use Google Earth as a reference then?
just to I use OpenStreetMap in the QGIS. I don't use ArcGIS for some reason because I am a supporter of open software, so I use QGIS and but for digitizing maps and recording and looking at the satellite terrain thing, I look for Google Earth just because they have very good maps in Sri Lanka.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm used to total station at best, but I'm fascinated by the new technology, and I was also wondering how we could possibly employ RTK drones and do a survey. But then again, most of the sites we were working are in caves or under rocks and a bit hidden. So I was not sure how useful that will be. But now with a new project of the Loyola Heights campus archaeology and the unsilent stones of Bishop Claver project, that opens up possibilities. And we just had last Sunday our first drone survey, and I could imagine that this might be very useful, also using RTK units and GPS handheld rovers, especially if you work in an area that is covered by dense vegetation and you don't want to cut, or you're not supposed to cut down the trees and plants. And if you would use a total station, you would have probably very often just obstructed views, while with an RTK, a handheld, you just go to the spot and get the GPS fix.
Yeah, but I think you would really need to have this ground GPS corrector, like a calibrator that you need, because sometimes I think, as far as I know, again, I'm not an expert, they were always telling me that the XY is easy, but the Z, that is always the problem.
It's always the problem. That's what I heard also. I mean, inside the campus, we have the good situation that there are several reference points, topographic markers that we can use for the base station. But if you are at your site in outside any larger settlement, how can you how can you get a reference point? So that's where I would, not really being an expert, but that's where I would see a difficulty.
Yeah, same. Like I remember as well that when we were calibrating it again and again and again, it's because the Z were not aligning like from the previous day's Z. So that's I remember that. And then they were saying that yeah, in Sri Lanka we were lucky because it's more of a localized regional thing, and also like we found the site again with the help of the people who were excavating the site before. So they are like 70s, 80-year-old men now, but they remember very clearly where they dug. So in terms of like really it was super impressive that they were like it's here or there, and just 50% and they were right. Like it's there. We found the edge of the old trench which guided us.
That's quite impressive.
Especially also we forgot to say that we were excavating in a national park, which is very impressive because you have elephants visiting you and all of these things. But also it's a bureaucratic nightmare because it's not allowed to do anything in the national park. So we were recording to the kilograms how much sediment we were bringing out for flotation and for sieving. So,
I can imagine. So, but it's good that you at least got the permit, even with all the restrictions. I would normally say, oh, you can just forget any research, archaeological research inside the national park. But that sounds awesome.
And that allowed us also to excavate a very well preserved site, because we were debating before whether to visit one of the sites that were outside, some of the sites that were outside the national park, but there were like habitation sites and modern human habitation. So we were like, yeah, maybe they were not as undisturbed as we would want. So let's go to the park first. If not, let's go back to the. So, but now, like I think our next plan is to excavate some of the sites where you have Australian-looking hand axes that they found there in the 70s, 80s, 90s trip, and look if we can find them in stratigraphy. I don't think they are Australian. They reported it in the how do you call it, a very unpublished preliminary report, but they have drawings. So it's one of those things that we will have. But again, there's interesting megafauna as well. That is my interest. But the megafauna mostly are coming out of gem mines. You know that Sri Lanka is very rich in sapphire and rubies, and they have mines for this. So when they are excavating these gemstones, they would find a hippopotamus skull or like something. This is super interesting.
And they really collect them. I'm surprised.
They gave it to the museum, and in the museum there's a lot of sites like megafauna from like with location sites, but not the stratigraphy, of course. But you have an idea. That's why we have the red dots in our map that the people were saying it's from this locality, because also the gem mines have to be registered, so we know exactly where the gem mines are. So.
I have. Oh, sorry, Rick. You.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You
just impressive recording. Especially that the use of barcodes. So
Yeah,
it's very specific and it's very handy. We should also adapt that.
Yeah, you should, because it's really one of the best thing that I would recommend to everyone is to just print QR codes, which is easy to generate, stick it on a find, and then you can find it very fast. You just scan it with a free software, and you can do an Excel CSV kind of formatting, very, very straightforward, and it's automatically in the database. And you just have a interface in the tablet where students can write what they found, even preliminarily. Really straightforward, and you can count very fast. Like in the end of the day, you have like X number of Stonetools.
And have a data after the excavation.
Yeah, that's why sometimes people are impressed of like, oh, how come you know already how many bones you have? Like it's because we are using the barcode data. It's not the true data, because sometimes one bag has like 20 bones in it, but you can still count. You know, like 20 bones per bag. Okay. And it's also it has significantly reduced artifacts getting lost. for us.
Sure.
Because the idea is if you all have the barcode as well, and if you have a bag floating, no one needs to write anything. You just have this waterproof barcode and you stick it there. Some, of course, we also double writings just to make sure. But in case the writing is erased, the marker sometimes got erased, you still scan the barcode and you still have the information, the number and everything.
Yeah, it's very efficient, especially with the number, with the volume of your finds.
Yeah.
Everything is a label.
And also there's also the opportunity to do this in the site because you're just barcodes, pre-printed barcodes at that. So you have pre-printed barcodes, rolls of barcodes that you just stick on a plastic. It's always double, like one in the plastic and one inside kind of thing. And then you have, very secure, and students are doing it. Or like some of the technicians working for us, they were doing it during excavation. So you have like a very fast turnover of artifacts that have been washed or not washed or but properly documented.
So
And you can
what is the information you would have on the barcode?
Yeah, so automatically you have the trench excavation, the excavation details, so the square, the pit, the layer, whatever. But you can also do in the total station the barcode number. So all Stonetools got their specific barcode and numbers in the barcodes because you stick in this Stonetool. This is find number 1,500. And then in your total station, you can just put Stonetool 1,500. So you know exactly also the 3D coordinates of that Stonetool kind of thing. So when you scan the barcode in the tablet scanner, you can see the information all the time. So even if everything get erased, you scan it and you have like, oh yeah, this is the information that is there. So you don't need to write anything. So there's also less room for error because also it's cut and paste, because when you are excavating the same layer, it in the total station, as you know, it automatically carries over what you are recording, what layer, unless you change it. So the same for the barcode thing.
This is brilliant.
Yeah, it's really handy, and it will make things faster. You don't need to really spend time writing. And yeah, it takes a lot of time just writing for each bag if you're recording everything
Maybe I can show
for
you
the
some.
excavation. So we had it before when I went to, he was showing it to me before when I went there. It was really amazing. Scanning and everything with the database automatically.
Yeah, even our Sulawesi bone tools had to be there because it's the rule that once it's in the lab, it has to have this barcode sticker just in case, things get lost. You know where the things are.
Yeah, that's really the way to go, especially for security, for safety purposes. So you know where it is. You can identify it.
And it's really not expensive at all because we are using this printer. And it's like a thermal kind of printer, but it's also printed on a waterproof plasticine kind of sticker that you can buy. I think one roll of that is like 15 euros. So it's really not that expensive in terms. And there's like, I don't know, 1,000 sticker in this one roll. So
you can go quite far, with one roll.
That's what we were doing, and maybe I can show like a lot of time were spent by our colleagues, mostly students who wanted to help to do this barcoding thing. I can, if we had time, show some pictures of that, like just to show to the people who are interested how it looks like.
Sure.
The recording that we have. Let me see. Yeah, so it's one thing that we decided in the MPIs when I arrived, and I can show you some of the photos if you. So so this is our excavation of the site. So everything is collected and recorded. That's the computer that is always being used to do everything in the field. These are my colleagues who are excavating. Lots of shell. It's total station all the time. Yeah, so this is the barcode recording that we are using. Maybe if I can zoom in. No, I can't. But here is the barcode. So we have some kind of a QR code that we use, so that because we probe that QR code is better, more understandable by the machine, even if there's dirt in the QR code, it doesn't get obscured that often. So everything that is found has this in the bag. And then, for example, we are looking for something here and we can find it with the scanner very fast. Yeah, so this is a tablet that we use, so we just scan everything. And you have also, because I'm putting the total station data every day, we have an awareness of how the error in recording was being made. Like, oh yeah, this is not supposed to be this depth, so the calibration at this day, this hour was wrong. So there's always this constant checking every day of like, we this layer, this one is not that depth. This is my team. Yeah, so this is a student of ours. His job is to classify Stonetools, because he knows Stonetools quite well. Microlites versus core, debitage, preliminarily, of course, but he was very useful. He was very, very useful. And also, you can take a photo with the tablet of the specimen with the barcode, so you also know what the specimen looks like preliminarily.
It's like a fail-safe system.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So everything, a lot of colleagues. So yeah, a lot of subtle stationing for me, but that's
You're not
so
using reflectorless mode, or
because we have this robot. At that time, I was trying to use a robot kind of thing. That is a program made by archaeologists from the Max Planck in Leipzig. It's amazing. It's like an interface where it communicates with a Leica total station, and it commands the total station from your laptop.
Yeah, I've seen that, but I've also seen the price tag, so I didn't look any further into it.
Also, we were using an open, the first version of an open access software, right? But because it's made by maybe Will Archer, he's like the famous guy who's doing South African lithic stuff. The problem is because he's the only one doing it, and he's very good in programming, but he's doing it as a labor of passion, of love. There's a lot of bugs. So in the end, what I did is I just used the internal robot of the Leica total station, because it was too much calibration every day and too much things. So yeah, we were sieving everything that we find. This is a rather informal pictures, by the way. This is from my computer. So, and we find like clusters of lithics, of quartz, debitage, that we can possibly, Chris Clarkson can fit them together, I hope. So, but yeah, we have the distribution of all of these things all the time.
Would you know of any successful refitting?
No, not yet. I'm not sure if he's very. I think he is focused first on typological analysis and detecting where the transition to the microlith, if he can find it. It's his main focus right now, because he worked with Michael Petraglia in India, so they sort of know what they want to do in terms of the regional study of these things. I think in terms of refit, he would have some. He will need some time, but he was only in Sri Lanka for like 1 month, looking at the thing. So I think, as of the moment, for the paper we are preparing, it's not yet the focus of this. But it will be cool because they are all using, as you've seen, quartz. And but by the way, we've sent to, maybe she's your student, Antonella
Pedaniana.
Yeah, so she's doing quartz stuff, and we tried sending her some of that stuff.
She will have fun with that, but she's coming from, she learned in Tarragona with Andreu Ole, and they have a lot of quartz and quartzite materials. It's very tricky and sometimes unpleasant to work with, because the optical qualities under the microscope are so different. They break not in a conchoidal way that in a controlled way that you can identify and that you can use for the analysis to your advantage, but rather irregularly. But yeah, that's she has experience with that, so that's certainly a good choice, and she has a brand new laboratory at hand, I think at Monrepos, if she's still there. So that's quite interesting. I find it really difficult. I was working with quartz and rock crystal and quartzite materials. So it was a mix of everything. So we had relatively good flints and chert, but also really poor material in early Mesolithic site in the Swiss Alps, just next to the Ötztal Valley where the Iceman was found. And they use the local material, which was that quartz, and it was more often than not just mostly the question: are they really artifacts? Were they really tools, or is that a natural product? So that's already the beginning. It's really very difficult to identify them as being tools. And it helped that they would appear in a context where you have really obvious artifacts made from a good quality raw material that came either from northern Italy, so crossing the Alpine main ridge at 13,000 years ago, which was quite interesting at that time, or would come from as far as Lower Bavaria in a straight distance of 300 kilometers. But you would have to cross one mountain ridge and two main river valleys. So those people went really very far to get to those probably excellent hunting grounds in the Austrian Alps at 2,000 to 2,500 meters above sea level. So that was quite a lot of effort. And then probably whenever they were short of their own raw material, then they would help themselves with the local quartz and try to make whatever tool they could produce. And so we have this mix of really wonderful geometric microliths and excellent flint napping technology together with those really crude and awful looking quartz tools that look like mode A, not even an older one. But yeah, it's the raw material, and if you have nothing else, you have to deal with that. But then again, they also had rock crystal, and they were beautiful. They would make beautiful tools out of them, and several of them they had not the slightest wear traces. So I suspected that several tools they made were just made for, I don't know, for the appreciation of the art of flint napping.
Yeah.
Oh, in this regard, you showed a few bone points, and of course we had our project in Sulawesi with very nice bone points, very carefully made projectile points, needles or awls. And then they are very well made, but again, the Stonetools mostly are not, or they look like they are, well, they don't know how to make Stonetools. But when you look at the bone technology, you can clearly see the skill in manufacturing tools.
And actually, it's Michelle Langley and I who studied the tools from the site, and it's super interesting because unlike the one in Sulawesi, which is of course it's younger, where the entire site is Pleistocene, they are sort of doing the same kind of tradition where you shave the bone. In our case in Sulawesi, unfortunately, it's beyond recognition. I mean, in terms of the faunal element that they were using. We know that they're from pig, from a large mammal, from the teeth, and mostly that's the only thing we can say. It's from a suid tooth, maybe a babirusa or a wild pig. In Sri Lanka, it actually mirrors the one that Phil described in Borneo incredibly well, because you have here, and the same in Songterus. And the question now is whether this is a tradition, or for me, it's not a tradition, but it's more of like the element that is dictating the shape of the tool. So when they are using the ulna or the fibula, they have X number of blank shape that they can make from the fibula, and this doesn't allow you to shape the fibula and remove the morphological identifier of this, like the anatomical morphology. I mean, so, and that's why also I think that's why they select these tools, because you have a place you can handle the tool in such a way. Yeah, so interesting. The monkey tools that I found on my PhD sort of like mirrors the one that we have here in Sri Lanka. It's really, really cool, I think. I can show you some of the details. Well, I will show you the paper if we have time of Michelle, because Michelle studied. I studied. So she's the expert of the bone tools in terms of like function and of morphology, and I'm the one who did the debitage and how they were manufactured from elements. So this is the paper that we made out of that one.
Yeah.
And then you can see here some of the tools. So the same side. So these are like some of the old stuff that we have. So you have bone points from monkey, and also like this kind of adze looking scrapers from large mammals. You can see here you have your geometric bipoints. The ones that are interesting, but some of them are from the upper levels. You have antler blanks. This is really interesting because this is not yet a manufactured tool, but what would turn into a tool later on. And this is what I'm saying when I say like almost the same as what Phil and I found, and Toma found in Java, that you have these fibula points. So you have this fibula of monkeys, and have the same shape. Because I think really this part of the fibula allows better manipulation, and it's as well here. You can see here kind of the things that they were making. This one is from much. These are like the cultural more decorated stuff. This is from, I think, the terminal Pleistocene. It's a decorated spatula, we think, made from a large mammal long bone. And then you have a lot of ochre and conus beads here. So yeah, it's really interesting because maybe it's in here where we have the oldest points. No, maybe it's in the other paper. Sorry, because it's where you have this thing that we found in Sulawesi as well, where they are possibly using a very sharp stone tool to shape the bone, and you can see the striation of that. And Rintaro clearly knew this from beginning, because before I even said that, he already put it in our paper because he really thinks, and I really agree that this is the case here as well. They were using mostly the ugly, let's say, not ugly, I'm not sure, but for me, you would probably disagree, but rather because I only know like more formal stuff in bone tools. So when I always see these microlithic things, I always say, oh, this is a tool. No, I'm not sure, but because you can see here, for example, these are from 45,000-year-old layers, and you can still see already like this is like very old, and you can even see the classical impact fracture pattern that you can see here, like the blunting, and you can see here it's quite weathered bone, but you can see this the striation marks here. It's very clear. You can see the striation marks here and here. So these are all 45,000-year-old layers. So you can see already, and these are the cut marks, of course, that you can see. And then in terms of the another classic thing that they were doing in this site is chipping off the enamel from the monkey canine to make it sharp, and having this very sharp. So they removed the enamel from the lingual side, so that in the labial side you have part of the enamel, and this is the sharp part that they use possibly for plant working.
Amazing.
It's like 45,000 years ago. So it's really interesting when And I think, and I forgot to say, that's why it got some media coverage, the Science Advances paper, because Michelle Langley argues, and of course I also, but she's more expert on the function, technotypological functioning, that these are bow and arrows, because you have very small things, or how do you call it? Yeah, blowguns, blowgun darts, bow and arrows. Yeah, because they are very small and they could fit a blowgun, but some of them are not so small and they cannot be projectile using a blowgun. So it's most likely, especially in the old layers, are bows and arrows, she argued. And you have hafted edges and breakage patterns consistent with this use. Yes.
Is that also how you distinguish between bone points, as in projectile points, and then bone needles, or alls?
Yeah, so you can see sometimes we use, like in the paper we use with Rintaro, we never say that they are projectile. We always say, this tool, we always say bipoints, unipoints, because we think they could be projectile, but there's no other way to prove it. But they can also be needle, so we don't know, so there's no way, really, it's really difficult sometimes because we are relying on established geometrical forms rather than function. So as we do more, and I'm not sure, I think Hermine is asking me this, and Michelle was also trying to do this, like use-ware is not as effective when it comes to bone tools as it is with stone tools, because you really see the at least for me, when I try doing it with Rintaro, all I see is the manufacturing edges, like the striation from the bone and the cortical surface and the anatomical features rather than the feathering and the breakage. So we have like classical fracture patterns that we know that these are high impact fracture or soft surface or rough surface, as with stone tools. But other than that, we rely mostly on a chain of deduction, like the size, the form, the presence and absence of hafting, a string attachment,
residues,
and also like it's like maybe topological, but I don't think so. But it's also a similarity with ethnographic bone points that were used as arrows compared to those that were used as darts, blowgun darts. So this is like a chain of argument. Not everyone is convinced, of course, and that's the beauty of science. So, but yes, we try to interpret differently, or some people believe otherwise, but it's always like that, as you know.
We need to conduct more experiments.
Yeah, we do. But also, I remember someone asking me about Ryan Robert actually did, which is super fantastic, because for a long time we know he did it because I had the unpublished thing, but finally he did it in the NIA monograph, I think, or somewhere else that I saw it was published, and he was boiling pig bones, trying to form them in the way that they found in NIA. Well,
they have some amazing bone points.
And that's why we cited it in from our Sulawesi report, because they have Ryan Rebet was also looking at the same kind of bipoints made from pig bones as well. So
very interesting. We're also looking for projectile stone tools, but it's quite impossible in Southeast Asia.
A handful at best.
But also, like my colleague Oshan, he did his PhD with these stone tools. That's his expertise. Again, I'm not an expert of this, but his sort of conclusion was this is like a composite kind of thing where you put the small, sharp quartz flakes into something, and then you have at least in the reconstruction, pretty much what Sue O'Connor presented in one of her paper, where you have this kind of almost harpoon-looking thing with rocks poking out of it. I don't know, but I saw it in one of her, maybe not so, I forgot, but maybe what's his name? Not Ken Upland, but Tim Maloney, the student of something that for North Australia or something like that in one of his figures. I'm not sure, but I remember seeing something like that. But so they believe that at least some of the blades, at least with Ocean, have residue, have tar or whatever plant residue in some of their edges.
It's good if that is preserved. I try to remember, it's not that long ago, a study of also on quartz tools that could have been used as hafted implements, but it was quite tricky. It's very well possible, and technically it would probably work, but yeah, not everyone is convinced.
Yeah, I can show you something, and I will ask your opinion about this. Wait, this is the same from the same PowerPoint. Maybe you can see. I will just zoom in. What do you think of, like, because I think they believe that these are hafted instrument, so you can have this like tongue kind of thing that you can see consistently.
But of course, the quartz crystal also breaks that way.
Exactly.
You have angular breaks.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm not. I really like. I remember when they were publishing this paper. It was before me when they did it. Yeah, I think the argument as well of some of the reviewers were like, yeah, the quartz are breaking this way, that way. So you have to be more specific in demonstrating. But also, as you said, like it's the contextual aspect that were quite impressive in this side, because there are no quartz in the next, I don't know, kilometers source. So the fact that they're inside the cave, it's in anthropic layers, most likely they were used for something. So
I just noticed the time.
wow.
I'm glad that still people are with us. Maybe now is a good time to ask if there are any questions still from the audience.
You're still listening.
No, so far there seems to be no pressing question. So what do you think? When can you go back to Sri Lanka?
We're planning to go back early next year. So because if COVID is a thing, it's like that, as you know, like it's an equal response on COVID. Like they were doing quite well before, Germany not so much. So at that time they were asking us come here. Like also, I also have projects in Armenia. So it's another project that I'm very much involved in. I'm prioritizing right now, and it's the case last year. Like they and Sri Lanka, they were like, come here, it's not that serious. If you get the quarantine or like cleared from quarantine, you can come, or I don't know, like take your, because if you have the first vaccine you can come, whatever. But now it's the reverse. They are doing not that well, I think, like in the Philippines where more cases, and in Armenia as well, and Mongolia, especially now. So all our projects, my project at least in this part of the world, had to be, yeah, indefinitely paused. So hopefully early next year, as latest September next year. I still have, I think, 2 years here in my position here in Max Planck. So I want to finish all these projects before I leave, and hopefully that would include one more site in Sri Lanka.
But in yeah, of course, I saw also in Germany the vaccination rate is quite okay. Not so much in where you are actually, and in Saxonia too.
It's like maybe we don't want to talk about politics, but the election was yesterday, and you saw what happened in my state.
Yeah, I'm still browsing through the news. It's quite interesting, and in a good and also not such a good way. Yes. It's really a mixed bag.
Yeah. I think AFD won 24% here. They are the #1 party in Thuringia and Saxony-Anhalt. more than 25, I think. 24.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah. So that's it. So that's the yeah, it's the vaccination. So we are relying that hopefully it's back to normal. At least the labs are running again. So
so you are fully back in the lab, so you can do more or less unrestricted work in the laboratories.
So we are now, for example, I have a colleague of mine who's I'm working in Armenia, and she brought samples with her. She has a DAAD short mobility grant. So we are doing all we can, fitting it in the 5 months or 4 months that she's here to do all the stable isotopes, zooms, proteomics kind of thing. So in addition to doing all of this excavation, I'm also doing, as you know, like a bit, but I'm also doing some preliminary proteomics work, and as well as kind of stable isotopes. So yeah, they have this method here where you can look at the collagen sequences in the mass spectrometry, and without morphological features, you can identify what animal they are, and it's rather high throughput. So you're not sequencing any DNA or anything, and it's quite cheap. I think it's like 5-6 euros in total per sample. So
that's affordable.
Lots of labor. They still have to mechanize and to do the protocol faster. But if you have time, but in terms of reagents and analytical requirements, I mean machine requirements, you need an expensive machine. But other than that, it's if you have this machine, it's rather cheap to analyze this. So that we are trying to analyze this, and I think it might. Let's hope in the future we can find a site, and we can try this if it will work in the Philippines, because it can really benefit. Philippines can really benefit because we have so much fragmented animal remains that we cannot do that much taxonomic identification.
Talking about, I would also like to say hello to Mylene, to your colleague from the Kalinga project. So she has joined us.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, Noel. So nice to see you. So nice to see you. I love the books behind you. Alfred, very nice to see you. Riczar, Dr. Riczar.
Likewise.
The two young doctors are in the house, and it's such wonderful. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with you both. I was stopping myself from making a comment, but if and when we do get back, hopefully it's a when, not an if, to excavation, could we do this in Cagayan? Like, for example, Noel, for cave sites, you have the whole eastern side of Cagayan from Bagao upwards, or even open sites on the opposite side and on the western side. Then, of course, you have your shell middens in the north. I think if you are looking for sites, there are a lot of sites in Cagayan waiting to be found.
Yes, I think so.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure when it comes to National Museum permit, because like the shell midden stuff, they've been researching it for a very long time. And I'm sure, for example, like when I was doing my master's, I saw, for example, because I didn't do a more environmental regional thing, but Ogawa and Garo, I think they have like maps of shell midden sites. So I think they've mapped it quite well. Not sure, but it's also unpublished monographs, National Museum report. So, but I'm also sure that they have very good maps, because that I saw the location.
Well, there have been a lot of changes, and there's actually some changes going to happen, right, Alfred, in terms of who's going to be giving the permits and all of that. And also in the National Museum itself, there's been a lot of changes. So maybe it's a good opportunity to revisit what has been started.
Actually, I have a proposal. I don't know if this is the right place to do this. Maybe people are watching us on Facebook, but in case you're interested in a research project, I have some ideas that the Philippines would definitely benefit from, and it's related to the Cagayan thing. Because I am working with someone here who's doing modeling based on radiocarbon and geography. So if someone is interested in collaborating, we would just need some most of literature research and like a radiocarbon database with GPS coordinates of the sites in the Philippines. That will be not that much, because as far as I know, there's not that much radiocarbon dated stuff, and maybe I might be wrong, but so it can also help in this thing, because if you don't just need radiocarbon but old sites without dates, you can ground truth them in like what I did for Sri Lanka. Not absolutely correct, but more or less approximately the location, and then you can check it later. You know, it's like a really nice, cool, small paper project that will be beneficial for the future as well.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, even with other institutes here. in the Philippines, and of course with the local stakeholders in Cagayan. So aside from Lalo, you also have the western side, as you know. Well, we're teammates there, so there's a lot of material in that area that hasn't been documented or explored. Sites just waiting to be explored. So I think we have material. It's a question of when and who.
And also, like, as far as I love the late Pleistocene stuff, Rick and Alfred can attest this, but I also do a lot of Neolithic stuff now. Like, also, like, for example, my research in Armenia mostly relates to the transition from the Mesolithic to the Neolithic and the Chalcolithic. So it's like more state formation kind of thing. So it will be really fitting, like what we discussed this before in your seminar series. I think the Philippines we really need someone to continue studying the Chalmidon sites. They are amazing. Like, everything we know of the Philippine Neolithic, not everything, most of what we know from the Philippine Neolithic comes from this part of Cagayan. So at least, like, we don't have any other Neolithic sites that are well excavated.
Oh, by the way, we have another colleague and friend here, Tanya. Hello, Tanya.
Hello, Tanya.
Good morning, Tanya.
Hello.
Nice to join.
Yeah, I'm also in Germany, so it's morning. So good afternoon to the Philippines. Yeah, happy to be with you. Very interesting. I like also this open format discussion, much better than only a presentation.
I really forgot that we are still being broadcasted. I thought I was just chatting to Alfred. The thought that we were talking
How are you, Tanya?
Oh, I'm okay. So finally vaccinated, and yeah, looking forward to returning to the Philippines, which can still last a little bit, I guess. So maybe next year in spring. But what I take away from this discussion is also that we should initiate some training in forensic archaeology. So this mapping, GPS mapping with drones, and would be also very good for the open site findings, and would facilitate very much documentation. So
I think what we saw in Noel's presentation and this whole discussion, I think, is there's a lot of room for capacity building, a lot of areas. And I think there's just so much opportunity. And I don't know, you guys are the experts in that area, and you would know where to start. And if we could start some while we are in quarantine, so we're ahead of the curve. And when the world opens up, we're just ready to go. I don't know if that's possible. I mean, you guys in Germany are able to move around a lot more than we are here, right, Alfred, Riczar? Ateneo was on granular lockdown. I saw that the news. Was that real? It was on that area of Loyola Heights was on it's the thing now, granular lockdown. Yeah. So I don't really know what it means, to be honest.
I was planning to go there tomorrow. So
that was 2 days ago. I don't remember up to when, but you might want to check. Are we able to travel to Germany already at this point?
We have a vaccine. My sister was in Switzerland 2 weeks ago, so she's from
here.
From Dubai, actually. From Philippines to Dubai for 1 week. I don't know. She managed to travel from the Philippines to Switzerland.
Okay.
Tanya, how is it? It's still restricted to travel to the Philippines if you are.
No, it's more or less. I could do it, but then you have to stay, I don't know, 10 days, even though you're vaccinated in a expensive hotel, and I don't see the point of this. While having also a flat.
I went through that. So it's not very pleasant.
Yeah. So you had to, Mylene, you had to stay 10 days or 14?
Yes, 10 days. You have no choice because they will only, to release you, you need a negative PCR test. They will only come on the 7th day to take your PCR in your room. And then they will only release the PCR and your clearance on the 10th day. So you have no choice. So coming from the freedom of California and then getting cooped up in a hotel for 10 days was really not very pleasant.
Yeah, I can. That's why we had a delay in our in the drone survey that we finally did on Sunday, because the drone pilot he just came back from Turkey and had to spend, I think he had to spend 2 weeks in quarantine because Turkey is considered a high risk area, even though he was fully vaccinated and everything, and he just got out, I think, last Saturday after a negative PCR test.
Yeah.
So which was good. At least we knew that interacting with him, so we are quite safe.
Yeah, that's true, but still,
Yeah,
it's
still.
not really, yeah, the challenge.
Yeah, and I guess that you can't really enjoy the usual facilities of a hotel.
No, you cannot leave your room, period.
You cannot leave your room.
No, zero. Your food gets delivered. Well, you can order from other places, but they will bring it up to your room in a cart. And then you put on a mask when you take it from the people bringing it to your room. Yeah. And everything comes in a carton. No plates, no nothing. No. Yeah. So I am looking forward to going to Germany.
Yeah, me too. I haven't been there. Well, Rick, when was that? We just talked about it. January 2020 was the last time.
I was there in January 2020.
Yeah.
How about you? Same?
Yeah, same. We had Rick's defense, and then I stayed for a few days more with my brother, and that was the last time.
Yeah, that because February everything closed down. March.
Yeah. March. I think March 16. It
March
was here.
16. Yeah, March 16. I came back. I left Manila for Frankfurt when Taal was erupting. The only reason I was able to leave was I was flying out of Clark, but all the flights in NAIA were canceled that day. And then
I need to leave soon because I have another Zoom talk in like 8 minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alfred. Thank you, Rick. Nice to see you. Noel, thank you so much. Tanya, good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Noel, for that great talk and for our very nice conversation, a very long conversation. Yeah, my apologies. We really took more time than expected. Short announcement. So first of all, thanks again for participating in today's webinar. There is in the chat box a link to an evaluation form. So please answer the evaluation form in that link. We have our next talk will be again on Tuesday next week, but at 2 p.m. And it will be Adam Broom from Griffith University, Australia. And he will talk about old art, new, ancient DNA, and the early human story of Sulawesi. So we are again in Sulawesi. We will again announce the registration details on the department's Facebook page and the other channels like Blueboard, etc. Aido, what did I forget to announce?
That's it, Dr.
That's it.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Noel, thanks again. Thanks, Marlene. Thank you, Tanya. It was really great seeing you all. Even if it's just on the screen, but it's really good to see your faces and have a chat with you.